Yeah. There you go. She chimes in. All right. So everybody, welcome back to Recruiting You, where we're really getting strategic about campus recruiting. Now, before we get into all the intros, the good stuff, the meat of the conversation, I really love starting off these podcasts with a really dumb, irrelevant fun fact. So Cam, I'm not sure if you're aware, but if you were to write out every single number, like 1 through 999, in like English letters, the letter A wouldn't exist until you get to 1000. So little tidbit, little factoid.
Wow, interesting. I like that. I like that. Makes you think, gets your brain going.
Exactly. So while our listeners are kind of pondering on that, why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit of background about you, who you are, and what really gets your gears turning about campus recruiting.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So I've always really been passionate about relationship building, communication. I've taken a very non-linear path throughout my career. So studied psychology in undergrad, went in, did a few different types of jobs in different industries, including sales, operations, also started a media company doing photography, filmmaking. So throughout that process, I just got a lot of experience working with a lot of different types of leaders and a lot of different types of teams. And so that was kind of my prerequisite, like start to really understanding what HR was, what talent acquisition was. So when I returned back to grad school, I really got interested in learning more about talent acquisition. I was going through that process myself, recruiting. So I worked at the Career Center at my school, at the University of Illinois, and I was a mock interview volunteer at first, got promoted to be the manager of the mock interview program. And that's where I truly gained a passion for working with students, helping to develop them, whether it's little tips and tricks for nailing that interview, making that resume a little bit better, or just really understanding what are your personal values and how does that reflect, how can you find a company that aligns with those. So that was kind of the preview of that. I knew I wanted to go into campus recruiting after that. Worked out in California for 2 years for a great company in the tech sector. So got to understand what a campus strategy was all about. Got to do the project management and program management for an internship program and student events, and then also just do the full cycle recruiting. So fell in love with that. Moved back to Chicago, and now I'm doing it kind of more on a high-level manager level for a consulting firm. And I get to continue to bring some of the things that I learned there and adjust it to a new industry, which is consulting, but recruiting a lot of the same kind of STEM students, business students. So I really love it. And then the biggest passion for me out of anything is just building those relationships, those authentic relationships with students, and not really being like a salesman, like taking that kind of aspect out of recruiting, but more so being like a coach or a consultant to these students, where they can gain a lot of knowledge, not just about our firm, but about other firms or the hiring process in general. So then they can take it back and get an amazing job, whether it's with us or another company.
Makes a ton of sense. If I were to do this is probably your career path, which is
a little bit everyone.
And probably sharing that with students too. I'm sure they relate to you, right? Because oftentimes people going into that college to career transition, they don't really know themselves. I really didn't know. I mean, graduated in 2018. So when you tell me all these interesting things to how you got here today, you being on the other side, that's not a salesy approach whatsoever. There's a really authentic relationship that's being built. So with that being said, I think that's a great segue to really set the stage and get into the workshop piece of it, if you will, at RecruitingU. So all our listeners, I'm sure you guys are already familiar, but for those who are just chiming in for the first time, we set the stage, we let Cam really steer the ship, and then we go through the workshop and then get into the nitty-gritty details. So Cam, I am coming to you as a green-eyed, fresh campus recruiter. My boss has just told me, hey, Rishav, I want more early-level talent students coming in. You really are going to be responsible for creating an employer brand on campus. I was like, yeah, sure, boss, I got it. I turn around, I have no idea what I'm doing. So please help me out. I don't know where to start. So what am I supposed to do? How do I even begin to find answers to that problem?
So I think the first step to that, that's a great question, is you have to use your resources first and foremost. And what resources do you have closest to you than your own firm, your own company? So I think you have to go internally first and build those strong relationships, whether it's with your hiring managers, with your leadership team, with your recruiting team that's already in place, and really get a sense for what they're looking for, what everyone's strategy is overall. Because without that, it's hard for you to go on campus and know what the messaging is or what exactly is the purpose of what you're looking for. So that's my first recommendation, is build strong relationships from day one with all of the stakeholders that are involved with the campus process, which should be everyone, really. I mean, everyone within a firm is a recruiter, should be involved in one way or another, whether they're an ambassador giving referrals on a board, or alumni from a student organization. So I think that's number one. And then once you have those relationships built and you ask some targeted questions and really understand what the firm is looking for and what the culture is like, and really what that value proposition is that we want to put out, then that's when you can start to build those relationships externally. So I really recommend there's kind of 3 different tiers. Is definitely you're looking for the students. That's the most important. So you want to build strong relationships with student organizations, different clubs, things like that. And you can go to campus actually for different student events. So whether it's career fairs, panels, development events, things like that. And that's an excellent way to engage with those types of organizations and build those strong networks of students. And then you also want to work really hand in hand closely with the administration. So making close ties with different programs within different universities is really important to understand what they're offering to you, what different services they have, but then in turn what you have to offer their students. And then I think the third one, which is a little bit tougher to get to, is building relationships with faculty. And that can be done through alumni, different professors. If you can get in front of students in a classroom setting, once again, kind of helping them develop, that's a really great way of putting your brand on campus, not just as this is a firm that's looking for students, looking for talent, but also looking to develop students to coach them through this process. So I think that's kind of like the most general kind of big picture way of looking at things. And then once you kind of have that all in place, then it's more of the tactical work that takes place from there on.
Makes a ton of sense. And I just want to make sure I heard you correctly, because I don't want to miss anything. I'm taking notes here. So we've kind of got what it seems like a 3-tiered approach, where the first one is obviously making sure that everybody that is involved, and it should be everybody when it comes to recruiting, is aligned. So get all those stakeholders agreed on something, whatever that true north is. And then you've got the students piece, right? When you're actually going on campus, you're there physically. And then the third one, and you'd mentioned that this is a little bit of a harder nugget to crack, is that faculty. And one way to get after them could be utilizing alumni or different channels to get them involved in the process as well. So going back to that first one, getting everybody aligned. I mean, when I hear other recruiters talk about employer brand, everybody talks about this, what it seems like a buzzword to me, employer value proposition, and asking people those questions. How do I try to come up with it? I don't know what our value proposition is yet. So any tips or advice on that?
Yeah, so I think the first thing you have to do is really ask, what are those values? What defines the firm? So you have to ask the people that work at the firm. You start with, from different levels, people that have been there for 15 years, maybe people that left the company, came back. Why did you come back? Things like that. Those stories start to build that kind of idea of what the culture is like, what the values are instilled within the firm. And then really using a lot of data collected from campus. So from student events, from your internship, from your new hires, that are able to kind of tell the story back and confirm, like, yes, this is what I'm experiencing, what I was told on campus it's like. And that goes back to the point of like being very authentic on campus. And you can't be authentic until you really truly know yourself as a company, and you're able to be transparent in, you know, the challenges that you might face starting at this in this new role, but also all these amazing benefits of working for a firm like this. So you really have to go to your people to find that out. There's really, you're gonna find some things online. You're gonna find some, you know, everyone has their 4 or 5 values, core values, their mission statement, but you have to hear that from the people to see if that's truly what is being put out.
Makes a ton of sense. And let me know if you know, this idea is what you're going for. Is I would gather all the stakeholders that are involved, maybe all the way from executives to people that recently transitioned into my company. And you're saying just go ahead and ask them like what they love about it, what they feel like those values are that they really align themselves to. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Yeah, I think that's a really important part. Is you ask the people and then you start to put together some themes that are coming up, some reoccurring themes, and that's going to be the basis of kind of that proposition. Of course, that's the internal piece of it. There's also a lot of research that needs to be done externally, so you can stay competitive, you can kind of benchmark off other people, but to really understand yourself, it's got to be from the people that have been there and that are experiencing it on a daily basis.
Makes sense. Okay, so I got the internal piece. Requires a little bit of legwork, right? Because,
Sure.
but no, I like that because now it's positioning me to kind of think like a marketer almost. Because I feel like I hear brands really talk about, okay, who are we? What's our identity? Well, it's go talk to your customers. Like they're the best salespeople or the people that you've got. Same sort of principle I feel like you're working with.
Exactly.
So then the students. My worry and my concern right now is, you know, when we go on campus, no one's really heard of us. I mean, I'll go to the career fairs, but sometimes I may not have a say in who sits next to me on the booth. And it can be a really good company and they've got lines out the door. And meanwhile, I've got 3 students coming up to me saying, who are you and what you do? So any way to like get in front of that, like what would be some proactive strategies that you can help me out with in terms of employer brand on campus?
Yeah, I think it's being creative. I think that's a big roadblock that companies face, especially startups or lesser known brands on campus. You have the bigger, you know, the big tech companies, the bigger consulting firms with the line out the door, like you said. Now, how do you compete against that? Well, being creative, being innovative. I think one of the first things that you can do is offer, once again, going back to kind of the development piece, is offering like resume workshops, offering panels, like different types of events, which other firms are also doing, but having a very targeted approach to it. So like I said, making relationships with student organizations is very key, because when you go on campus to a career fair, you're right. It's like you're fishing, there's a big pool of candidates. Whereas if you're more targeted and you know, okay, I'm looking for STEM students or business students, then you can then go to those organizations at particular schools and build those relationships. And they're always looking to bring on new firms. Because they're thinking about the interests of the students and giving them a diversity of options. So I think that's the key thing, is building those relationships with different clubs, student organizations, and then through them you can host certain events that kind of take you out of the career fair lineup where you might not be seen as much, but actually hosting very innovative, creative type of events that are going to catch people's eyes, and they're going to remember your brand, not just, oh, this person tried to sell me a job or sell me this position, but this person taught me how to edit my resume, or this person taught me networking skills, or different skills that I can now use for this whole recruiting process, whether or not I pursue this particular company. So I think it's a lot about being creative, innovative, and using what you have. And a lot of those things are very cost effective, but especially if you have a low budget. Those events, you know, and the sponsorships with those clubs are relatively inexpensive compared to the cost, you know, to fully hire someone without having those relationships built.
Makes a ton of sense. I think the theme of what I'm extracting here is what you alluded to earlier. You know, you talked about this idea of like a salesperson or people being kind of a little bit defensive to that. But instead, it seems like the creative ideas that you're presenting almost makes you, the recruiter, seem like a trusted advisor, not somebody that's going to say, oh, sell me on this job.
Right.
Okay. No, it's getting my gears turning too. So then that last nugget, right? I mean, advisors, literally in the college setting, we've got advisors, faculty. I mean, why is that a hard nugget to crack? Is it just, you know, professors, or do you think they may be a little bit sort of guarded about, hey, this is my classroom, I have a certain way of doing things? Or is it just there's different visions? Like, why isn't that relationship a lot stronger than it should be?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. I think it goes back to competition. I mean, a lot of the times, some professors have kind of their companies that they work with, that they heavily promote. I mean, it depends on your industry, of course, but it's kind of just getting through them. But like coming out as like a campus recruiter and like, hey, I'm so-and-so, I would love to present in your class, it's probably not going to land so well. But having an alumni come up and say, you know, someone that had a really strong relationship with this professor and say, hey, now I work at so-and-so company, I would love to, I remember we had some presenters come in and teach this and that. I've now become a subject matter expert in this topic. I would love to come in with a panel and be able to present this for the students from actual practitioners. Because, you know, one thing is learning it from the book, learning it from a professor, but when someone comes in and actually presents to a class that's actually doing the work and being able to teach you a little bit more about the real life of a consultant or an accountant or this or that, it's a lot more meaningful. So I think it's just really like cracking it. It's all about, once again, the network that you have, and that's built early on from, you know, early identification programs when you have these students that you're developing freshman, sophomore year, through to all the way that now they're full-time employees and they're able to come back. They had such a great experience and have something to give back to the firm with these different connections. I think that's such a great part. So it's not impossible. It's just really dependent on the industry, the types of classes there are. But I see increasingly universities have a lot more classes in place that are meant for these type of things, so meant for development early on, specifically on the side of learning, you know, how to prepare yourself for recruiting, for getting a job early on. So.
Love it. So, you know, we want to come away with this pretty tactical, and I think you've given me some good advice here to go back to, let me make sure I haven't missed anything. So I've got the first bucket is internal, right? Those are that's the single source of truth, if you will, is our own internal people, getting them aligned and asking them really what they love about the company. That qualitative feedback, then I digest that, mix it to create my value proposition. And then for the students, as opposed to saying, hey, you know, I wear my t-shirt with my logo and expecting them to come to me, develop those relationships so that way I create events where they're learning something so that they view me as a trusted advisor. And then for the faculty is to then, if I've got those internal people in the beginning, if I did a really good job, figure out alumni or figure out people that can come into those classrooms to provide a real hands-on learning experience, and then build a relationship with the professor that way. So kind of a three-prong approach. Anything else to add to that before we start to wrap up here?
Yeah, so I would even include the faculty part in like the second prong, the second bucket, and then the third bucket kind of being actually like the tactical things that you're going to do. Like once you have those relationships built with both, how are you going to be innovative? Like what kind of presentations are you going to be? Are you just going to be one of the companies that goes in and does like an info session where you talk at the students for an hour? Or are you going to do a workshop where you can actually engage with them so much more. So I think that like the third bucket I would say is, what are you actually going to be doing with now that information, knowledge that you have, and relationships that you have on both sides? What are the actions that you're going to take? And the last thing that I'll kind of mention is, you have to think about it like, be human, you know, like you have to be like not robotic, like be a person, not just be a campus recruiter, be someone that can build credibility, that can build trust with these students, and put yourself in their shoes also, because you have to be thinking from their perspective of, you know, they're busy with school, they're busy with all these different events, different things. So how are you going to attract their attention, but also how are you going to give back to them in the way that you would have wanted when you were a student, when you were doing that? And finally, like I said, don't be a salesman. Like a big part of it, be a coach to them. Be like a trusted advisor, so they can see you as that. And that's how you're going to stand out against a lot of the competition, especially if you're starting out early on. They're going to remember you for that more than a company that has a big name that's just like, you know, sell all the time. So those are the main things that I would say are very important to think about starting off. Of course, there's a lot more to think about after that, but just in the very beginning, I think those are the key things to remember.
Sweet. Yeah, I mean, it's campus recruiting, I feel like, is a big behemoth in and of itself, and we kind of want to make sure we're biting that elephant one piece at a time. So with that being said, I mean, I think we walked away with some great things. We try to be pretty quick here. You get your tacticals, implement it, go back to your meetings, and really start brainstorming on how we can be that coach and that trusted advisors to a lot of students, because I'm sure that's something that they need now more so than ever with the current climate. So thank you, Cam, for coming on RecruitingU, getting pretty strategic about campus recruiting. Thanks for acting it out with us with this fictitious scenario, but it was a ton of fun having you on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and keep on doing the good work that you're doing. I really love what you're putting out there, and I think it's going to be really valuable for a lot of different firms to help them kind of go to campus and learn a few things. So thanks again for having me on. Appreciate it.
All righty. Sweet.
All right, I just wanted to give a disclaimer that I'm here representing myself, and everything that I mentioned today are my own thoughts and opinions and don't necessarily reflect the current firm that I work for, but just wanted to give that mention just so everyone knows. But if you have any questions that you want to follow up with me on kind of my overall thoughts and theories on campus recruiting, I'd be more than happy to answer those. So thanks a lot.
All right, sounds good.